All right, so I know I promised the committee that we would stay on time. So we're starting at 3:33 and we're an hour. So hopefully we'll be, within time. So first I'd like to, the panel is challenges and opportunities of EPSCoR and under-resourced universities. Heard a lot so far about sort of what people have been able to do with the PRP. We've already gotten some questions about how to expand this into a broader set of communities. So we have a panel here that we hope is pretty diverse. One of the things that we tried to do is make sure it was different types of schools and universities, as well as have some geographic diversity. So we have Damian Clark from South Carolina State University, Deborah Dent from Jackson State University, Matthew Ketterling from Colorado School of Mines, Jeff Letourneau from Network Maine, and Doug Genoan from University of South Dakota. So what we're going to do is each of the panelists is going to have up to 7 minutes just to give you some background on their organization, and that what we're really hoping to do is have some question and answers. So while we do have a couple of canned questions, I'm really hoping that those of you in the audience have some questions for us. So first up is Damian. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So as the slide said, I'm the former CIO of South Carolina State University. About a month ago, I transitioned to Alabama A&M. So if there's anybody, even though I'm talking about South Carolina State University, if there's anybody from AMU here, I do have the logo up, so just mention that. So South Carolina State University is located in Orangeburg, South Carolina. It's about an hour south of Columbia, South Carolina, and an hour and a half of north of Charleston. So that's a nice way of saying it's in the middle of nowhere. It's an 1890 land grant institution. There are about 6 HBCUs in South Carolina. South Carolina State University is the only public HBCU. Some interesting facts: it's the only HBCU and school in South Carolina that has a BS in nuclear engineering, an MS in transportation and business administration with a concentration in agribusiness, and a doctoral in education. So I'm going to talk about what I call transition from SPAN to MICC. So about 2 years ago, I accepted the CIO position at South Carolina State University. Previously, I was a CS faculty. About 3 months into the job, I got a call from a gentleman I knew nothing of by the name of Jim Bottom. And he said that the CIO of South Carolina is a co-PI on a grant. And the co-PI needs to be at a workshop in Orlando in about 2 or 3 weeks' time to help host a SPAN workshop. So after 3 months in the job and having a baptismal by fire and other things, I was happy to hear that I'll be going to Orlando in a few weeks' time, because that's the only thing I focus on. So at the workshop, 2 things dawned on me. As a graduate student at George Washington University, Notre Dame, University of Miami, I never thought about cyber infrastructure. I always thought that whatever I needed, it was there as a PhD computer scientist. I never thought about what took place behind the scenes. I wasn't concerned. I used a lot of data, I used a lot of computing power, and I thought it should be available, and it was available. As the CIO of South Carolina State University and previously CS faculty, it dawned on me that I needed to now provide this infrastructure, and I had no idea how to provide this infrastructure. And sitting down at a SPAN workshop, which is a strategic partnership in advanced networking, I was hearing similar conversations like the ones I'm hearing today, stuff I knew nothing about. I always thought I just needed to spin up a virtual machine in VMware and provide VPN access to that machine, and that should be enough, knowing that that's not the case. So as CIO, I now had to provide that infrastructure, but not only provide that infrastructure, I had to convince others around the table, especially at the cabinet level, that this infrastructure is needed. Now, I'm surrounded by folks that barely understands the traditional infrastructure. Now I have to explain, well, that traditional infrastructure cannot sustain research as it should. And now we need another infrastructure. luckily, I had a president who was kind of technology savvy, and he understood at a very high level what was needed. So he always, as I would say, he always had my back. So when conversations like this took place, I had his backing in terms of this is something that needed to be done. So from the SPAN workshop in 2016, now in 2018, I'm writing a CC Star grant to submit to NSF to develop a science DMZ infrastructure. And to my surprise, while at this workshop, I got the email from Kevin at the NSF stating that we were formally accepted to receive this grant. Now, this process started in 2016. I'm here in 2018, the middle of 2018, and I can stand here today and talk about receiving this grant. This could not have happened without the collaborations and without these types of workshops. With Jim's help, and most of you may know Jill, a lot of this information, a lot of the collaboration that took place before the writing of this workshop was because of them. It was extremely necessary to have this type of partnership, to get this type of understanding, to get to the point of writing this grant. So after attending many workshops and actually hosting workshops also, the last one we hosted was at Georgia Tech Convention Center, where we invited as many HBCUs, as many MSIs as possible, and we came up with a name called the Minority Serving Cyber Infrastructure Consortium, where we are creating a draft memo on how we should move forward as a group and how we should help ourselves, how we should organize ourselves and help ourselves in creating cyber infrastructure. So I want to talk about the infrastructure that I wrote about for the SESU grant. Now, this diagram is very mundane compared to the technology that's discussed in this workshop. But what I want to highlight in this diagram is two main things. As everyone knows, the science DMZ has to be separated from the enterprise network. So this is SESU's enterprise network, and this is what I'm calling the science DMZ. Now, what's of particular note here is this router, the border router. This border router is installed and maintained by Clemson University. So before this infrastructure, we had 1 gig of commodity internet and 0.3 gigs of internet 2. With this border router, we are able to now go to 10 gigs of internet 2. This border router is going to serve as a POP. So we are able now to connect other institutions such as Claflin University, and there's a technical university, a technical college about a mile away to this POP, and provide internet to connectivity. So as mentioned in the EPSCoR deep dive, the smaller institutions need to get together themselves and learn what could be done among themselves and how they could present themselves to the bigger institutions that's doing, the real development. And this is a prime example of that. So I can fill this slide with all of the challenges and opportunities, but I think the top 2 challenges are buy-in and funding. So, with schools that are underfunded, the infrastructure that we have, I have switches that are end of life, and I'm so happy that they still work because I don't have the funds to renew it. But with the cyber infrastructure grant, I could buy new switches to entertain the science DMZ. The opportunities, I encourage you to have more workshops. This was mentioned earlier, to have more workshops like this, more tutorials, which allow schools like myself to network and to get to know all of you and to increase the collaboration that could exist among ourselves. Thank you.
So next is Dr. Deborah Dent from Jackson State University.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay. And I'm going to talk really, really, really fast because I don't want her to come up here and give me a wave. But good morning. Afternoon, and I'm Deborah Dent. I'm from Jackson State University, and I'm the CIO there. And I've been there for about 6 years now. In my previous life, I worked for the federal government in a research laboratory, and then I decided to join Jackson State. Totally different environment because I was used to being on the research side, and then I went to Jackson State on the IT side. And there was a big divide there. There was a big wall that was built there. And Richard, Alo, and I came at the same time, and we started working together. And it's taken us about 6 years, but we have torn down the wall. A little bit about Jackson State is that we're a historically Black Carnegie doctoral research university, and we're located in Jackson, Mississippi, in the middle of the heart of Dixie. Okay. We're designated as an urban university. We're located in an urban community. We're a learning community. And what we specialize in is that we believe every student has all types of capabilities. So we have special learning processes in which we believe every student can be reached. Our students may come to us with a different background, but when they leave, we're determined that they leave successful. Okay, we were formed in 1877 as a Baptist college. We're accredited. Our enrollment right now is about 8,500 students. We're mostly in-state students. And we mostly have first-generation students. And as far as what region we're part of the Mississippi Optical Network, which is the 4 universities in Mississippi, which is Ole Miss, Mississippi State, University of Southern Mississippi, and Jackson State. Okay, some notes about our cyber infrastructure is that we have we have a 10 gig connection to internet too. It was funded some years ago in 2010 by EPSCoR. And what we found out now is that we're about to upgrade our mission network. We're about to upgrade, and we need new equipment. But thank goodness there was some work that was going on, and under the leadership of Jim and Jill, we participated in what you've heard about the CC Star NSF grant proposal. And at the I2 conference in San Diego, we got the nod that we received that grant. So we're excited that we can now see that there's going to be a change that's going to take place. If I could sing, I would sing it's a change taking place, but I can't sing. And so we're also participating in the consortium that you've heard Damian talk about. Now we have some challenges. We've lost state appropriations over the last 5 years. Most people are losing state appropriations. We're ending some special STEM funding that we had. We're losing talent. We have a decrease in our enrollment, which is causing us to lose some of our faculty and our champions, because when you lose funding, then everything is a ripple effect. And we also have a new leadership. So we're adjusting to a totally new leadership right now. And we also are challenged with having a capable CI, not capable, I guess a CI workforce, because it's a little hard recruiting people to come to Jackson, Mississippi, sometimes. So, but the good news is, because of the collaboration efforts that's been going on since San Diego and since we talked with Larry Smart, there's a lot of things that's going on, and we've been invited to these type of workshops. We're excited because our eyes are open. We see that we have great potentials. We have a great potential and opportunities to work with everybody in this room. So remember my face when I come knocking at your door. I want to work, and we want to be your partners. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up is Matt Ketterling from the Colorado School of Mines.
Hi. So I'm a cyber infrastructure engineer with Colorado School of Mines, and I direct our research support team as well. You know, I had an interesting story yesterday. I sat next to a lady and I said I work at Colorado School of Mines. She was very surprised and I found out that she said or heard Colorado School of Mimes. So that was interesting. She was even more surprised when I started talking about advanced computing. So we are a public institution. A lot of people think Colorado School of Mines is private. We are public. In Golden, Colorado. Colorado is not an EPSCoR state, and I think everyone here probably suffers from not enough resources. So we're not different in that aspect as well. So I think the biggest we started supporting research about 3 years ago. I started in data management, helping with data management plans. And the first thing when talking to researchers is, hey, we had nowhere to store any kind of data for research. So we were starting at ground zero about 3 years ago. As part of the CC STAR grant, we had the cyber infrastructure position, which I'm on now and actually should be coming up in the next year. We'll be finishing that up. So we're looking to extend that position as well. What I really found was that the problems we were having were not technical problems. I think all of us in the room can solve a lot of the technical problems. It really came down to the people and building relationships. That was one of the areas that I really focused on, was not so much like implementing a ton of technical stuff, but just really getting out and getting to know our researchers, what they want. I know stuff like their family background, that kind of stuff, just really personal relationships. And it really made some of the difficult conversations, such as chargeback, a lot easier. People, were much more receptive to it. So I think as far as relationships, Colorado School of Mines is a very small campus that is both a pro and a con. We don't have the necessary resources to, do everything we want. But really, I can get around the campus and talk to, a majority of the professors one-on-one. We have both in research support. There's HPC and non-HPC research support. So we're just implementing our third HPC cluster now. So that should be running fairly soon. And we have 3 FTEs built around our HPC support. Non-HPC, we have 2. It's myself and a sysadmin that is newer to the position and for implementing any kind of data transfers, applications, that sort of thing. So we have about a petabyte of storage that's dedicated for research. We do utilize Globus for our transfers. We're connected to FRGP and member of RMAC too for the mountain region. So future initiatives at Mines, we're actually looking kind of to formalize a center. It's kind of a more of a marketing. So we are actually research support is actually part of IT, central IT, and we are no plans to separate to a separate research computing. We've actually found it works really well being part of central IT, but having the branding of the center of ... would actually help with the, I think, interacting with research a little bit, kind of give it a, more of its own entity, though remain under central IT. So a lot of our solutions, we have it's me and my sysadmin, but we work a lot with central IT. Everyone works together to help with research. So I'm looking to implement student base for CI workforce development. That's something that's on the radar. We're pushing right now for big data initiatives, building out Hadoop clusters, visualization. We've got a couple different rooms in the build process right now. We are connecting. We have a teaching mine about a half an hour for about 30 miles from Mines. It was originally a gold mine. It kind of transitioned into training students how to mine and mine safety. And then now it's being kind of transitioned into a general underground facility for automated drones, mapping, three-dimensional mappings of tunnels, and that sort of thing, environmental sensors. So we're looking at trying to get that connected. Right now it's basically a DSL modem, so we're working on running fiber across a city right now where no fiber exists. So that's kind of that's a new one for me. We have a big USGS mines collaboration. If you guys don't know, there's the National Earthquake Center is actually on Mines campus, and we are looking. USGS is looking to move more of their offices and research to Mines campus as well. So we're in the process of working out a huge 200,000 square foot building. So, and then we're always open to outreach with other collaborators. So if anyone has interest in collaborating, please let me know. So.
So next is Jeff Letourneau from the University of Maine System and Network Maine.
Good afternoon. So I hate standing behind podiums, so bear with me on some of this. As Wendy just said, I'm the Executive Director of Network Maine. Network Maine is the infrastructure or technology infrastructure group for the University of Maine system, which is the public university system within the state of Maine. We're also the group that supports the Research and Education Network for the state of Maine, which interconnects not only the University of Maine system, but a bunch of private colleges, research institutions, and the vast majority of our K-12 schools and public libraries in the state. To give you some sense of what's going on in Maine, we are roughly about 1.3 million people throughout the state, the vast majority being toward the southern part of the state, and we're rapidly shrinking. We have many more deaths than we have births in the state. We have much more outward migration than we do inward migration. So as you can suspect, that puts great stress on resources available to the public university. So we're always looking to collaborate, which is a nice way to say spend other people's money in order to get things done. So that's really what we focus on these days, is looking to see how we can work together in order to be able to accomplish something greater than we all could separately. So this very quickly is a quick map of what we call Maine REN, or Maine's Research and Education Network. All right, I have to decide between seeing my slides and seeing you folks, so the slides win. Give you some sense, on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side here, is a list of the University of Maine system campuses. On the left-hand side are various private colleges and research institutes or institutions throughout the state that connect. Well, not only connect to Maine REN, but actually also help fund it. While it's all largely a gentleman's handshake in terms of how the network is funded and supported, we have had great success over the almost 30 years that I've worked at the university system in maintaining these relationships amongst the institutions. Much of the funding from this either came from, well, it came from lots of different places, I get. Primarily from some state level funding, from some EPSCoR Track 2 funding, both within the state of Maine and collaboration that existed at one point between 5 EPSCoR states in the Northeast. The private colleges all contributed some, as well as the NIH INBRE program within the state of Maine. So I'm not sure if we're totally unique in this, but you might notice in the map that I put here, if you pay attention to such things, we're bordered by 2 Canadian provinces, but only one U.S. state. For us to get anywhere in the U.S., we always have to, or often have to, fund infrastructure in other states in order to get to where we need to be. So back in the mid-2000s, when we were first building out the network, we approached UNH and said, and Dartmouth actually, and said, all right, we need to get down to Internet 2 with a optical network, and we're going to build through your state. But wouldn't it be great if you guys jumped on board and helped us do so? That's been a great collaboration between the institutions. We actually run the Maine and New Hampshire optical networks as though they're one network. And then recently, in the past year, we just upgraded the vast majority of that network to new Sienna platforms to be able to start doing 100 gigabit waves. Why I say most is the northern, what we call the northern ring, which is, Fort Kent and Presque Isle and other places you've not heard of, but basically along the Canadian borders. We didn't do as part of this upgrade. We need to find some, more cost-effective ways to get bandwidth up into there. While they don't need the ability to do multiple 100 gigabit waves, they do need multiple 10 gigabit level type of connectivity. So it wasn't cost effective to use the same platform up there, but we hope to bring them an upgrade over the next year or so. Along with collaboration to build the space infrastructure, we've also been collaborating with various entities within the state for years in order to be able to support research. University of Maine in Orono, where most of the Network Maine staff exists or reside, is the research institution within the state. But as of late, in terms of cyber infrastructure, the private colleges actually have taken a lead in being aware of and trying to implement some of it within the state of Maine. Right now, we're actually collaborating with Colby College. They received the CC Star Award a year or so ago. The first year they spent on largely building out their campus level network. But the goal really is to create a small, dedicated research network interconnecting Colby College, the University of Maine, and Jackson Laboratory. What's the driver behind this is there is some coursework that goes on between researchers at Jackson Lab and UMaine that get delivered to Colby College. And largely around computational biology and genomics. And while they've been successful in having those courses work, they really want to change how those courses are delivered and making larger data sets available to the students. That means either moving the computation, as people have said earlier, closer to the data, which largely exists at the Jackson Lab, or vice versa, moving the data down closer to Colby College. So part of the award is to, as I say, what I think of as putting our toes in the water, implementing some of the research platform technologies, perf sonar, DTNs, and so forth, in this small little research network, dedicated research network, to see how we can get our cyber infrastructure people up to speed on them and better understand it. I should point out, Central IT is not involved at Colby or at Jackson Lab, other than to make sure the science DMZ thing means it's outside their corporate network and they don't have to worry about it, which we repeatedly tell them that's the case. So, so far it's been a good success. We've largely have we have the backbone installed now. The optical network slide, that build-up just got finished earlier this year, included dedicated 10 gig transports between the three institutions. Colby's done, as I said, their campus build-out, and now we're bringing Jackson Lab up on board. And then we're going to start playing with the various technologies to help figure out how best to move data around. Thank you.
Okay, next is Doug Jennewein from the University of South Dakota. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon. I'm Doug Jennewein, Director of Research Computing at the University of South Dakota. So whenever I talk about South Dakota, it seems beneficial to point out where it is. South Dakota is in the middle of the country. USD is in the southeast corner, right next to Nebraska, in Vermilion, South Dakota. A population of less than 1 million. And we have 6 public higher ed institutions, as well as 3 tribal schools. 2 of those public schools are research-intensive sort of R2 schools. We have a 10-gig state research and education network built in 2008. You'll hear some more about that later on. And we were a founding member of the Great Plains Network. They are our regional service provider. So about USD, like I said, we're in Vermilion, South Dakota, founded in 1862. We have about 10,000 students. It breaks down to the presentation ending.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen.
Very good. Very good. So we have 10,000 students. You could hear them just now. I'm not going to touch your laptop anymore, Wendy. We're billed as the flagship institution of the state. We have an emphasis on liberal arts and the only law and medical schools in the state. Like I said, we're an R2 institution. We're big role in the state EPSCoR Track 1 programs. USD manages the NIH INBRI in South Dakota as well. So we're well acquainted with these kinds of programs. And here's a picture of our campus cyber infrastructure circa 2004. And the takeaway, the reason I put this here is not because we built a cluster out of Celeron CPUs, but rather because we started building cyber infrastructure completely in a vacuum, which Celerons might be the direction you would go if you didn't know where you were going. But we built this system for one user to run one application blast in the med school. And when we were done, or when the system was in production or in use in the med school, we wrote it up in the Linux journal. So that was the community that we knew about was paper magazines. So that's where we started really building things in isolation, not engaged with the community or our neighbors, at least not yet. And we stayed that way for a long time, for almost 10 years, and started to dip a toe into sort of the national research cyber infrastructure community or efforts in 2013 when the CIO came into my office and said, here's something called CC Star, apply for it. So we did that and we failed. We tried to design a campus network, again, in a vacuum without collaboration from other schools or national entities, and that proposal was rejected and failed. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and engaged with our neighbors, Nebraska and North Dakota, national organizations as well, and regional organizations, our friends at the Great Plains Network, ESNet. We watched a lot of Jason Zarowski webinars with my CIO to learn the language, to learn the vocabulary of what these kinds of projects are meant to do. A big shout out to Internet 2, broadening the reach. That program was instrumental in getting us on board with advanced cyber infrastructure. We had some engineers come to our campus, which we were terrified to have happen, but we went through with it and learned a lot, and that was a great experience. Hi, John. And finally, Exceed, and I would be remiss to not mention the Campus Champions, probably the most instrumental organization in building cyber infrastructure, at least at USD, and I would say in South Dakota as well. So we applied again in 2014 to whatever the CC Star program was called that year, and it was successful. And since that time, just since 2014, we've gotten 7 more grants for a little over $3 million, including 3 from the CC Star program. And I'll tell you more about one of those in just a moment. So we've had very good luck, good experience building new infrastructure, a new supercomputer at USD, a new distributed data store funded by CC Star, efforts in software and data carpentry, facilitation, user training, things like that. And we're participating in efforts to get that state research and education network up to 100 gig. So by reaching out to the community, by involving ourselves in the community and asking for help and learning what our neighbors are doing, in 4 years we did 1,000 times more than we did those first 9 years. So the community is vital. Regional organizations are vital in rural areas and isolated areas. So we have lots of challenges. I'll just mention a couple. In a shop like ours, there is really no research computing department other than me, so we rely heavily on the central enterprise IT organization and their priorities and their availability, and that's been a learning curve for both of us. They're not used to research, and I'm not used to the enterprise mindset either. And what we have also seen, I mentioned some new systems right in the last slide, compute and storage and things like that. We've had good luck funding equipment and systems and capabilities. That's great, but the human aspects, those needs are largely unmet in South Dakota. That has been our largest challenge. Somebody mentioned it's hard to get someone to want to work in the middle of nowhere. And even when you're only 427 miles from Mount Rushmore, it's still hard to get people to come and work there. So again, I will plug regional organizations. No single campus in South Dakota has critical mass to do anything at a national scale. It is vital that we work together, and those regional organizations, regional networks, really act as aggregators of demands. Help us speak with a louder voice. Thank you.
Thank you. And we stayed on time. So now we have about 15 or 20 minutes for question and answer, which is probably a little bit more than we've had in other sessions. So I really want people to ask questions, but I'll start. These are some questions I just put together. So, and I think you all addressed this a little bit, but maybe we could take a little bit more time of what the limitations you've run into in terms of participating in local, regional, or national cyber infrastructure initiatives. So do one of you want to start to answer that? And we do have microphones, so you can pass them down.
I'll pass this one right there.
So I can talk about a general struggle that we see, at least in South Dakota, and probably, again, common in rural areas, for participation and activity at the national scale. Rural culture is is not always, that is hard to do in a rural culture, right? Where folks are maybe 1 or 2 generations removed from homesteaders and a very can-do attitude. Don't always like to reach out to our neighbors or to larger organizations, to national entities. That was certainly something that I saw on our campus, was folks were just hesitant to look beyond the state borders, just because that's the culture. So rural culture may be part of it.
Other comments?
Maybe I can echo a little bit of that. Maybe not only the rural kind of culture of it all, but just the isolation. Everybody's interconnected technology-wise, but it's the interpersonal networks that are so important in order to move things forward. I was joking earlier today that if I went to UMaine campus and asked our research community if they ever heard of a national research platform, I think I'd get deer in the headlights kind of looks because they don't think of that. Yes, they may collaborate with others across the country, but they're not doing big scale science. So a lot of this technology maybe not only be not aware of, but largely isn't applicable to their local research needs. That's why, like with the Colby project, we're doing some stuff locally just so they can become aware of the technologies, such that when the opportunities arise, they may be able to be more comfortable in reaching out and doing more.
So if I may expand on culture, I think HBCUs, we have a specific culture. You would think that as HBCUs and having similar issues, similar environments, that we would tend to try to work together a lot quicker. That isn't necessarily the case. I think we were very fortunate with the little group that we formed with SESU, Jackson State, Claflin University, and one or two others. We actually formed that group at the CIO level, and we are trying to get, the president and others to come together. So at the CIO level, we could see the problem, I guess, pretty clearly and understand the issues. But I don't think everybody else understands the problem or wants to understand the problem until you start to talk about money. And the first reaction is to shun away. But the challenge is, I guess for me personally, is to communicate this to non-technical folks that it's essential, all right, and not use technical terms to confuse them, all right. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
I think the challenge that we've had also is that we have a lot of researchers that do a lot of research, but they operate in silos. So if you don't have collaboration locally, it's going to be more difficult to get them to collaborate regional and national. So it was just breaking down that local culture of everybody does everything in their own silos, because we had different research efforts. I call them shadow IT organizations, high performance, all over the campus. So breaking down those barriers and getting everybody to talk to each other, that's been a challenge. We're breaking through it, but it'll continue to be a challenge in some areas.
Yeah, I think I can echo a lot what Deborah said about our silos. At Mines, our researchers are very collaborative. As far as cyber infrastructure, I mean, we're, in the last couple of years, we started our cyber infrastructure initiative. So there again, we, are maybe about 4 years ago has centralized IT, and now we're pushing these different initiatives for cyber infrastructure. So it's been hard. I think our neighbors being University of Colorado and Colorado State University haven't really saw us in that kind of game of collaborating, and so we're kind of changing that and building up those relationships of at least our state neighbors, and hopefully something like a national research platform would expand that a lot further.
So questions from the audience?
I have a question. So I'm also at a small university, although part of a larger system. I'm Jeff Leakley from University of California in Merced. And as I have sort of implemented our science DMC, one of the things that I observe around my campus and in other places is that a lot of the success of the Science DMZ is predicated on its ability to penetrate as far into the campus network as possible. And that's a challenge we all share, no matter our size. Can each of you maybe characterize what the state of play is there for you, and maybe what your strategy is to get as far out into the labs and to the instruments as possible?
So we're doing it as a case-by-case basis. So we do subdivide them out on subnets, different instruments. We have, instrument subnets and stuff. So and it's case-by-case. So we don't have like campus-wide DMZ for whoever wants it. It has to be approved. We are looking at software-defined networking as a way of going forward with Science DMZ. So.
I was just going to pass it along. We're working also, since we're central IT, we're working closely, in fact, closer than ever with our researchers. Our grant that we just received is allowing us to create our DMZ. So we're in the implementation phase right now. So we're looking at it, and our plans is to make it as deep as possible. We want to give our researchers everything that they need, as long as we still have to be concerned about security. I heard somebody say that up there earlier, but we still have to be concerned about security in this day and age that we're living in. But we're working with them, and we're going to examine everything so that we can build that DMZ so it will meet their needs.
So I can start by saying we don't have a good answer. We have a DMZ, and it is one network, but it is entirely data movement equipment. So as far as other instrumentation, laboratory depth, we don't have that yet. One of the things that we are exploring with the GPN is moving the research applications out to the DMZ, containerized research applications out to the DMZ. That doesn't answer your question about instrumentation, but we're not moving things deeper, and we are looking at how to move at least some of those research applications farther out to the edge in a secure manner.
So it's a similar case for us. If you remember the diagram that I put up and I spoke about the router and the POP, that's not funded by NSF. That's something I decided to do with state funds, right? In fact, we actually did that before we got accepted for the funding. So to your point and to your question, that was my concern. I mean, it wasn't just about getting bandwidth to the campus. It's about getting bandwidth within the campus, and that's my major issue. So when I wrote the NSF grant, it was about getting that bandwidth as close as possible to the researcher. And I kid you not, that got me in trouble. Because when NSF saw what I was trying to do, they were like, well, we want to fund the bandwidth to get to the campus. And I said, well, no, I'll do that. I want to develop an infrastructure to go as deep as possible in the campus, as close as possible to the researcher. That's where my major issue is. And I had to, demonstrate as clearly as possible it's not touching the enterprise side, but we're still designing it, and it's not totally clear as yet, but that's the main goal. Yeah.
So in our case, I would say our funding crisis helped us in terms of the science DMZ. Most of our colleges in the early 2000s, mid-2000s timeframes were drastically cut in funding. So when they had to choose between letting a non-tenured faculty go or their IT person, guess who went first? The IT person. So we largely have been able to we don't have a lot of instrumentation in terms of microscopes and whatnot, the big data sources. It's more computational than anything else. So we opened up the central IT data center and brought all those resources internal to the data center, got them out from underneath people's desks and out of the closets and whatnot, which helped us greatly in terms of creating that physical consolidation. Now, I say that things are getting better. We're seeing more talk about various microscopes and other sort of things. We've been upgrading campus backbones in buildings over the last 3 years. So we're physically getting prepared to be able to extend that environment out to labs or instrumentation on the campus.
All right. Any more questions? We have time for maybe one more.
Well, I actually have a question since I'm holding the mic. So we are talking a lot about research and the National Research Platform, but by building this out, we also get infrastructure for education. We get infrastructure for workforce development. And I just happen to be looking at the president's goals for funding for the future, and one is workforce development. And I'm just wondering if any of you are specifically using any of this infrastructure, and especially since you're in states where we're looking at retraining and getting into, I'm trying to avoid politics here, retraining and getting people into some of the STEM workforce. Are you using any of the NRP, NSF funding to target workforce development?
Leaving the NRP side of it out, one of the areas that advanced computing group that we created 3 or 4 years ago has really excelled in getting funding for is doing STEM work within K-12. They've got a couple very successful programs in leveraging things like Minecraft to teach programming. They've got one going on now that has to do with, so don't start a sentence until you know you can finish it. But basically, physical awareness in STEM and being able to translate the value of that cognitive awareness across, I'm not saying this well, but basically taking some of the finds they have found around boys and girls and how they learn different, and the value of going through things like, be it Minecraft or others, the greater benefit it has to the girls than it does the boys in terms of moving forward in progression. Taking some of those findings and doing some research on how do you do that in a way that it doesn't feel like you're pinpointing programs just for girls, but rather bring the girls and boys together, doing the same sort of things in a productive way that will actually be able to bring greater value in bringing STEM to the female population.
So the short answer is no, but we should. And the reason why we are at that stage is because this entire thing is very new for us. And we are now getting into it. So to go to a dean or a chair and say, well, we should talk about developing a course or two in cyber infrastructure. Even that term cyber infrastructure got me in so much long conversation of what is cyber infrastructure? That to start a conversation about course development or curriculum development, we are just not there. So what I did was, in the grant, I funded some monies for students. So while we are designing and developing the science DMZs, we will have students helping us. But we definitely need to get to more workforce development.
So I would say almost exactly what Damian said. No, but we should. We do a little one-off things. We demonstrate a Raspberry Pi cluster to science fairs and do K-12 things like that. But as far as formal workforce development, nothing strong yet. I think the A-State's EPSCoR Track 1 program might be a good place to do some of those things. That's one possibility. But as far as things that we're doing right now, again, like what Damian said, this is still fairly new to us, and most of the battle that we're fighting right now is simply awareness, and not training or literacy, but just awareness that these kinds of resources exist and these kinds of problems can be solved. So that's where we are right now.
Okay, so we have a combination that's going on. As far as workforce development with the cyber infrastructure, we're not where we need to be, but we're looking at this as that we'll be developing it. But we have this new opportunity that we have is going to allow us to develop our infrastructure for some other funding that we have, which is focusing on workforce development. We're training students in cyber security and cyber warfare. and we have some big data initiatives. But one of the problems was that we needed the infrastructure in place. So now that we have this, we won't have to take that funding away from that grant, and we can focus that funding on more training our students, and then we can provide the infrastructure needed for those type of projects.
I think with, I mean, in Mines we're all engineering, 99.5%. So a lot of our students program, a lot of our students, are very hands-on, and so we have started using, students for projects such as Hadoop clusters. Let them, take infrastructure and build it out. Let them work with databases. Let them work, whatever projects that they're interested in. We started doing that. We don't, it's more of a work study or internship type program, but, as these different projects come up, we're just kind of letting students run with them. With guidance from our central IT. So we set up a standard of this is how it's done if you're coding and that sort of thing, and students have support. So.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you being on the panel.